Michael Jackson was 5 years old when his childhood ended. While other children played with toys and made friends at school, he stood under blazing stage lights, sweat pouring down his small face, hitting notes that grown men struggled to reach. His father Joe watched from the shadows, arms crossed, eyes cold. There would be no mistakes tonight. There never could be. The Jackson 5 were climbing fast, and weakness had no place in their world. Michael learned early that perfection was survival, that love came wrapped in applause, and that the price of stardom was everything a child should have been allowed to keep. By the time he turned 10, Michael had seen more cities than classrooms, more hotel rooms than birthday parties. While his brothers found moments to be young, to joke and play, Michael remained serious, focused, driven by something the others couldn't see. He watched children through tour bus windows, playing baseball in empty lots, riding bicycles down suburban streets, their laughter carrying on the wind. Something inside him ached at those moments, a hollow feeling he couldn't name. He wanted to join them, to know what it felt like to be careless and free, but the stage was calling, always calling, and he had promises to keep to people who depended on him. The world fell in love with little Michael Jackson. His voice carried magic that made adults weep and his dance moves sparked joy in millions. But success came with shadows that grew longer each year. He had no privacy, no normalcy, no chance to discover who he was beyond the performer everyone expected him to be. The mirror showed him a face that millions adored, but he couldn't recognize the boy behind it. He was a product, a sensation, a money-making machine. He was everything except what he desperately wanted to be, just a kid. As Michael grew into his teens, the gap between his public image and private pain widened into a canyon. Acne scarred his face, and his father mocked him for it. His nose bothered him, and the teasing never stopped. The boy who brought joy to millions carried a burden of self-hatred that would haunt him forever. He began to understand that the world loved Michael Jackson the performer but had no room for Michael Jackson the person. The distinction would define the rest of his life, a split that would eventually tear him apart from the inside out. By 18, he was the biggest star on the planet, but he still felt like that 5-year-old boy, searching for something he lost before he knew he had it. Money couldn't buy it back. Fame couldn't fill the void. Success only made the emptiness echo louder. He started building walls around himself, creating a private world where he controlled everything, where he decided the rules. But walls that keep pain out also trap loneliness inside, and Michael was about to discover that isolation, even chosen isolation, comes with a terrible price that no amount of talent or wealth can ever repay. The idea came to him like a dream, vivid and complete. Michael would build a place where childhood never ended, where innocence lived forever, where laughter drowned out the cruel voices that haunted his memory. He would create what he never had, a sanctuary of pure joy, untouched by adult corruption, greed, or judgment. He bought 2,700 acres in California's Santa Ynez Valley and began construction on what would become the most misunderstood place in America. He named it Neverland Ranch, after the magical island where Peter Pan and the Lost Boys lived forever young. To Michael, it wasn't just a home. It was a statement, a rebellion, a middle finger to everyone who tried to steal his innocence. It was his second chance at childhood. The ranch transformed into a wonderland that defied imagination. A full-scale amusement park rose from the California hills, complete with a Ferris wheel, roller coaster, carousel, and bumper cars. A private zoo housed giraffes, elephants, lions, and exotic birds from around the world. There was a movie theater, an arcade filled with vintage games, and gardens that stretched into the horizon. Every detail reflected Michael's vision of perfect childhood: bright colors, endless entertainment, and absolutely no rules that didn't serve joy. Adults who visited felt like they had stepped through a portal into another dimension, one where responsibility didn't exist and wonder ruled everything. But Neverland wasn't built for adults. Michael opened his gates to children, especially sick children from hospitals, underprivileged kids from broken homes, and anyone who needed escape from harsh reality. Buses arrived weekly, carrying children who had never experienced anything like this paradise. Their eyes widened as they rode the rides, played with the animals, and explored every corner of the magical estate. Michael walked among them, not as a superstar, but as a fellow kid, laughing at their jokes, playing their games, sharing their joy. For a few hours, these children forgot their pain, their poverty, their illnesses. They were just kids being kids, and Michael was finally, truly happy. The world watched with confusion. Why would a grown man spend millions building an amusement park for his home? Why did he surround himself with children instead of adult friends? Why couldn't he just grow up and act his age? The questions came loaded with suspicion, dripping with judgment that Michael felt like knives against his skin. He tried to explain that Neverland wasn't about refusing to grow up, it was about reclaiming what was stolen, about giving others what he never received. But his words fell on deaf ears. Adults saw weirdness where children saw kindness. The media smelled a story that would sell papers for years. The trap was set, and Michael was walking straight into it. What Michael didn't realize was that his greatest act of love would become his biggest vulnerability. By surrounding himself with children, by being their friend and protector, he painted a target on his back that his enemies would eventually hit. The very purity he tried to preserve would be twisted into something dark and sinister by people who couldn't understand that sometimes the most damaged souls are the ones who work hardest to protect others from the same damage. Neverland, his dream made real, would eventually become the evidence used against him, the symbol of everything the world found suspicious about Michael Jackson. Paradise was about to become a prison, and innocence was about to face its ugliest test in the court of public opinion. The first whispers started quietly, like poison slowly spreading through water. Michael Jackson's relationship with children wasn't normal, people said. He spent too much time with them, cared too much about them, trusted them too easily. The media began asking questions with answers already decided, framing innocent moments as sinister secrets. When Michael held a child's hand, it wasn't comfort, it was grooming. When he invited families to Neverland, it wasn't generosity, it was a trap. Every act of kindness got filtered through a lens of suspicion that transformed love into something monstrous. Michael felt the shift happening but couldn't stop it. How do you defend yourself against accusations that haven't been made yet, against a narrative that exists in knowing glances and raised eyebrows? Then in 1993, the nightmare became real. A 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler, whose family Michael had befriended and supported, accused him of sexual abuse. The news exploded across every television screen, every newspaper headline, every conversation in America. Michael Jackson, the king of pop, was now Michael Jackson, the suspected pedophile. The allegations were horrific, detailed, and splashed across media outlets that treated them as proven fact before any investigation began. Michael's world collapsed in an instant. His reputation, built over 3 decades of revolutionary music and charitable work, crumbled in days. The man who brought joy to billions was now the monster parents warned their children about. The truth behind the allegations was complicated, messy, and ignored by a media frenzy that cared more about ratings than reality. Jordan's father Evan Chandler was a dentist with financial problems and Hollywood ambitions. He had recorded conversations suggesting he would destroy Michael if his demands weren't met. The accusations came after Michael refused to fund Evan's screenwriting projects. None of this mattered to the public. The story was too good, too sensational, too perfect for an audience raised on tabloid entertainment. Michael went from beloved icon to public enemy overnight, and no amount of evidence suggesting extortion could restore what was destroyed. Michael's team advised him to settle the civil case, to pay millions to make it disappear, to move on with his life and career. He resisted at first, wanting his day in court, desperate to clear his name and expose the lies. But the criminal investigation was dragging on, and the stress was literally killing him. He had developed an addiction to painkillers after a scalp injury during a Pepsi commercial years earlier, and the pressure of the allegations pushed him deeper into dependency. His handlers convinced him that a settlement wasn't an admission of guilt, it was a strategic move to end the civil case while the criminal investigation continued. In January 1994, Michael paid over $20 million to the Chandler family. The criminal investigation eventually closed due to lack of evidence, with the district attorney admitting they couldn't make a case. But in the court of public opinion, the settlement was proof of guilt. The damage was permanent and devastating. Radio stations pulled his music from rotation. Endorsement deals evaporated. Fans who once worshipped him now questioned everything they believed. Michael became a punchline, a cautionary tale, a name synonymous with the worst kind of depravity. Late-night comedians built entire routines around mocking him. Saturday Night Live sketches portrayed him as a monster. The whole world, it seemed, had decided that Michael Jackson was guilty, and nothing, not evidence, not logic, not the actual facts of the case, would ever change their minds. Michael retreated deeper into Neverland, behind higher walls, into darker isolation. The place built to preserve innocence had become the cage where innocence went to die, and the man who loved children more than anything faced a future where that love made him the most hated person alive. For nearly a decade after the settlement, Michael tried to rebuild his life. He married, had children, continued making music, and attempted to reclaim his legacy. But the shadow of 1993 never left. It followed him everywhere, coloring every interview, every public appearance, every attempt at normalcy. Then in 2003, a documentary called Living with Neverland aired, featuring Michael holding hands with a young cancer survivor named Gavin Arvizo. The footage was innocent, two friends sharing comfort during difficult times. But after the documentary aired, Gavin's family accused Michael of sexual abuse. The nightmare was starting again, only this time it would be worse, more public, and nearly fatal. In November 2003, 70 police officers raided Neverland Ranch with search warrants, tearing through Michael's private sanctuary like invaders destroying a sacred temple. They photographed his bedroom, seized his belongings, and treated the place children loved like a crime scene. Michael wasn't home during the raid, but when he saw the footage on the news, something inside him shattered beyond repair. Neverland would never feel safe again. The one place he built to escape the world's cruelty had been violated by that same cruelty, invaded by people who saw evil in every corner of his imagination. He would rarely return to the ranch after that day, unable to bear the memory of what they did to his dreams. The trial began in January 2005 and lasted 5 months. Every day, Michael walked into the Santa Maria courthouse wearing suits and sunglasses, his face gaunt, his movements slow, his spirit visibly breaking. The prosecution painted him as a calculating predator who used his fame in Neverland to lure vulnerable children into his web. They brought witnesses who testified about inappropriate behavior, described the layout of his bedroom in disturbing detail, and suggested that his entire life was designed around access to victims. The media circus outside the courthouse was relentless. Helicopters circled overhead. Protesters held signs declaring him guilty. Fans camped outside, praying for his freedom. The entire world was watching, and most had already written the ending to this story. But the defense told a different story, one based on actual evidence rather than speculation and prejudice. They revealed that the Arvizo family had a history of making false claims against celebrities for money. Janet Arvizo, Gavin's mother, had previously accused JCPenney security guards of sexual assault and received a settlement. She had coached her children to lie in that case, and evidence suggested she was doing the same now. Witnesses testified that they never saw Michael behave inappropriately with any child. Employees who worked at Neverland for years said the accusations were impossible given the constant presence of staff and other people. Former accusers, including Wade Robson and Brett Barnes, testified that Michael never touched them inappropriately and that suggestions otherwise were lies. The prosecution's case fell apart under scrutiny, revealing a story built on the testimony of a family with credibility problems and absolutely no physical evidence. On June 13, 2005, after deliberating for 7 days, the jury returned verdicts on 14 counts. Not guilty. Not guilty. Not guilty. 14 times they said the same words, exonerating Michael Jackson on every charge. He was innocent in the eyes of the law, vindicated by the justice system, cleared of the most serious allegations a person can face. But outside the courthouse, the world shrugged. Many people still believed he was guilty, assuming he bought his freedom with expensive lawyers and his celebrity status. The not guilty verdicts didn't restore his reputation, repair his legacy, or heal the wounds cut deep by years of public torture. Michael left the courthouse a free man, but freedom felt like another kind of prison. He had won the legal battle but lost the war for his humanity. The trial that was supposed to deliver justice instead delivered the final blow to a man who had been fighting for his dignity since childhood. Michael Jackson never fully recovered from the trial. He left America shortly after the verdict, moving to Bahrain where a member of the royal family offered him refuge from the media storm. He was only 4 to 6 years old, but he looked and moved like a man decades older, worn down by years of accusation, addiction, and alienation. The voice that once commanded stages around the world had grown quieter, uncertain, fragile. He recorded music sporadically but never recaptured the creative fire that drove him through Thriller, Bad, and Dangerous. The spark was gone, replaced by exhaustion that seeped into his bones and wouldn't let go. Neverland stood empty, a monument to dreams that died hard, and Michael couldn't bring himself to live there anymore. His children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, became his only source of genuine joy during those final years. He protected them fiercely, covering their faces in public, shielding them from the same spotlight that burned him alive. He was determined to give them the normal childhood he never had, even though his fame made normalcy impossible. They didn't call him Michael or Dad, they called him Daddy, and in those moments when they played together, laughed together, loved each other without cameras watching, Michael found brief peace. He was still that little boy from Gary, Indiana, still searching for the innocence stolen from him, still trying to prove that love could exist without exploitation. His children gave him purpose when the world had taken everything else. But financial troubles were closing in. Years of lavish spending, bad business deals, and legal fees had drained his fortune. He owed hundreds of millions of dollars, and creditors were circling like vultures over a dying animal. In 2009, desperate to solve his money problems and prove he still had it, Michael agreed to a series of comeback concerts in London called This Is It. 50 shows at the O2 Arena, tickets sold out in hours, and suddenly the world remembered why they fell in love with Michael Jackson in the first place. Maybe redemption was possible. Maybe he could show everyone that beneath the tabloid caricature was an artist who changed music forever. Maybe, finally, they would understand. The rehearsals were grueling. Michael's body, ravaged by years of pain medication, surgeries, and stress, struggled to keep up with the demands of the show. He hired Dr. Conrad Murray as his personal physician, paying him $150,000 a month to help him sleep, to manage his pain, to keep him functional enough to rehearse and perform. Murray administered propofol, a powerful anesthetic meant only for surgical settings, as a sleep aid in Michael's bedroom. It was dangerous, reckless, and illegal. Michael knew the risks but didn't care anymore. He needed sleep, needed escape from the thoughts that tortured him every night, needed relief from being Michael Jackson. On June 25, 2009, Conrad Murray gave Michael another dose of propofol. But this time, something went wrong. Michael stopped breathing. Murray tried to revive him, panicked, wasted precious minutes before calling for help. By the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. Michael Jackson was pronounced dead at UCLA Medical Center at 2:26 p.m. He was 50 years old. The news spread across the world in seconds, crashing websites, stopping conversations, creating a wave of grief that shocked everyone, including those who spent years demonizing him. In death, Michael became human again, fragile, tragic, and deeply missed. The world mourned, but the questions remained. Was Michael Jackson a misunderstood genius destroyed by false accusations and media cruelty? Or was he a damaged man whose obsession with childhood crossed lines that society cannot and should not accept? The truth is probably more complicated than either version, more human than the monster or saint narratives allow. He was a boy robbed of childhood who spent his life trying to give other children what he lost. He was an artist who changed music forever but couldn't change the narrative about his personal life. He was loved by children who saw his kindness and misunderstood by adults who saw only weirdness. He was Michael Jackson, brilliant, broken, and gone too soon, leaving behind music that will live forever and questions that may never have simple answers. In the end, maybe that's the real tragedy, not that he died, but that we'll never truly know the man behind the mystery, the boy who never got to grow up on his own terms, the lost soul who found home only in the laughter of children he could never convince the world he genuinely loved.